Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is an important bill in terms of finally achieving and assisting young families in being able to juggle those commitments of parenting, children and working. The decision and support for our working families does lead to stronger outcomes for the economy and our community. The decision about whether to return to work or take more time off to care for a child is a decision that all new parents must face, and all too often it is women who are left with that responsibility, and that needs to change. Men and other parents and partners must shoulder some more of that proportion and responsibility.
Great. Thanks, Ray.
Of course, there are trade-offs when that choice has to be made, of either staying home or going back to work, and whether they be financial or emotional, because none of these choices are easy. And I've spoken to many young parents, especially women, across my electorate who rely on very many different types of care, from private and public childcare and relying on family to help juggle the demands of working life and the exorbitant cost of accessing childcare. I've been there personally and understand how incredibly hard and expensive it was. As a barrister, as a sole trader, don't get access to any of that kind of assistance. And it was a juggle between local childcare centres, my parents assisting me a number of days a week, and then also having to juggle, often leaving court, leaving chambers early because of the crazy times and closure times and the penalty rates of if you're 5 minutes late picking kids up from a childcare centre. It's incredibly hard, and all too often these decks are stacked against women, because all too often it is women that are left to shoulder this responsibility. So my call out to men is, it is good for your relationship with children to spend more time, and so that responsibility of caring should not fall on mothers. It has to fall equally on all parents. It is good for the relationship with your children, and it is good for our economy and our society, because it means everyone has that opportunity to participate. For all too often for women, the frustration of wanting to go back to work but being penalised by reduced eligibility to claim days in childcare, you have this penalty cliff that there's a point at which you're basically working to pay for it rather than actually working to get ahead. And that is just wrong. Women who are juggling commitments need to feel supported by the community and our broader society. Parents need to feel supported. This is an essential part of Australia moving forward, being able to have that juggle between family, children and work and progressing careers. Of course, support comes in many ways, through the childcare system, through family support and through a broader understanding of the pressure on working parents. The call for universal childcare holds significant benefits to our children, and for far too often it has quite insultingly been pitched as somehow something that is given to women. With respect to every member, it is something given to our society, because we go nowhere unless we have children, and we go nowhere unless everyone in our society has the opportunity to work and contribute and has that equal opportunity to do those things. So universal childcare holds significant benefits to our children, our community, our economy and our society. Of course, for children, it also provides the best opportunity to be happy, safe and secure, and builds the necessary foundations and skills that children need throughout their life, especially when they then enter schooling. It's incredibly important that all children have that opportunity to access that early childcare experience. It's particularly impactful for children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, for them to be able to get into those opportunities. So I very much support the implementation of full universal access to childcare for this minimum of 3 days, and this bill is a welcome start. The bill being introduced because the activity test is broken. The childcare subsidy does not provide adequate safety net for working families. We have the second highest childcare costs in OECD countries. It is prohibitively expensive, and whilst there are childcare deserts and lack of availability in regional communities, the cost in urban communities is exorbitant. My community would have to have one of the highest costs when it comes to childcare. Australian families spend about 27% of their income on childcare, right? Nearly a third of their income on childcare. compared to the OECD average of 14.5%. The Productivity Commission's report on Universal Childcare report found that 328,000 parents were not entering the workforce due to the affordability and availability of childcare. Now, we hear a lot in this place. We have staffing shortages, we have skill shortages. You know, you can point and blame immigration and you can do all those things, but ultimately the first and best thing we can do is utilise to the best and the fullest capacity our current population, right? Making sure everyone in our communities now have that equal opportunity to participate. So for all those parents, think about it. 328,000 parents are not entering the workforce due to the affordability and availability of childcare. So this bill goes some way to fixing that, and I welcome it. And the activity test introduced by the previous government in 2018, designed to encourage workforce participation in women, was shown not to work. The test is used, it determines how much childcare subsidy a family can receive, but it's linked to hours a parent works, volunteering, job hunting, on leave or studying. And it has been heavily criticised because, unfortunately, it has not resulted in increased workforce participation. In fact, it has disincentivised workforce participation. The Australian Institute of Family Studies evaluation found that no evidence that the activity test caused any increase in workforce participation. Instead, it most likely to hurt lower-income families and discourage youth from access of early childhood education for their children. The Productivity Commission and Thrive by 5 campaign, the Parenthood Group, all have done phenomenal work in raising this issue. This is not a women's issue. This is a society issue. This is an economy issue, unless we can all participate. So it is very good to now be looking at this activity test and getting rid of it. It's too convoluted and difficult to understand. The subsidy, as it was, doesn't increase enough to cover the added cost of childcare as a parent increases their working commitments. Too often, parents, usually women, were left to work part-time because the cost of going to full-time or increasing their days is simply too prohibitive. And that has so many knock-on effects. It means that women stay maybe on part-time or casual contracts instead of going into permanent employment. It means that they are not accumulating the same amount of super. It means they are not eligible for the same promotions. And you then see that pay gap and that opportunity gap widen. So the focus on the parents in that activity test does not provide an opportunity to allow all children to have the best opportunity to thrive. In fact, families have been found to deliberately keep their hours low enough to receive support. Alarmingly, the Productivity Commission found that 70% of sole parents and secondary earners have reduced their hours due to the reduction of childcare subsidies. Now, if there was ever a counterproductive measure, this would have to be it. The ACCC found that families on the lower income spend a greater share of disposable income on childcare and are disproportionately impacted by the childcare subsidy activity test. The impact is that some 126,000 children from the poorest households across Australia have missed out on early childhood education. And unfortunately, that missing out is compounded then over the years, and it makes a difference. So this bill reforms the activity test to ensure that families who earn less than $530,000 per year will be guaranteed access to at least 3 days, or some 72 hours, of subsidised childcare a week. According to the Department of Education, households earning between $50,000 and $100,000 per year will save around $15,000 a year. This is really significant. It provides a guaranteed 100-hour entitlement per fortnight for parents caring for an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child, and I welcome that additional provision for First Nations Australians. It's a high-stake roadmap, there's no doubt. The bill presents an opportunity to improve gender equity by providing more choice between increasing caring responsibilities and entering the workforce. It's a first step to make universal childcare available for all Australian families. Better access to affordable childcare leads to additional hours of work by more parents joining the workforce. It's estimated that the taxation uplift will actually be in the order of some $292 million. And it will increase Australia's GDP by some $6 billion. So I dare anyone in this place to actually then oppose and say that somehow this is not a good measure. The bill presents an opportunity for children that they have access to high-quality childcare that will set them on the right path. Now, of course, this only works if we couple this with a measure to make sure childcare is available in all communities in Australia. And I've heard many from the opposition in their speeches talk about the childcare deserts, and that does not warrant refusing this bill or opposing this bill. It means go to the table, sit down with the government and actually find ways to do it on other issues. So sit down and work out how we do roll out childcare centres so that it is available in every community in Australia. Pointing at the lack of availability is not a reason to not support making it available to all and making it more affordable to all. It's so important. I've spoken many times in this place about the need to help women participate equally in work and strengthen our gender equity, including in our superannuation laws and paid parental scheme. So for me, this campaign to increase the childcare subsidy to provide more support for our working families, this is essential, and that's why it is so important to be committed to being in this place, to having more voices in this place, more diversity, but especially it is about having more women's voices in this place, to make sure these issues are not pigeonholed, but they are put front and centre of good economic management. This bill is welcome, but more can be done. The activity test it still needs reforming. I do think that we need to remove the activity test completely to ensure greater universal childcare access. The affordability is one piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't work without access to high-quality childcare centres. So, as I said, we need to do more about this. But actually, during the break, the government committed to funding and construction of more. They've committed to 160 centres. And unfortunately, I remember at the time there was a media outcry about the scale of that spend. Well, you can't come into this place, complain about the lack of availability, oppose the measure to build and support more childcare, and then also oppose making it more affordable for families. And then go out to communities and say somehow you're in this place fighting for families. So I really support the government on this issue. We need to do more to make sure there are more centres built, and in particular that regional and rural Australia has access to it. The Victoria University has done a study and shown that 24% of Australia live where there are lack of childcare availability. There are more than 3 children for each childcare spot. So it's slightly better than in 2020 when it was 34%, but it shows that there's still a lot to do. There's so much more that needs to be done. So whilst, yes, I represent an urban community, I am acutely aware that this needs to be available to all Australians, that all communities need to have access to quality childcare so that all of Australian children have that opportunity to develop. So I encourage the government to consider incentives to increase availability for high-quality education and early learning, such as rewarding centres if they meet or exceed national quality standards. We need to make sure there is incentive. Of course, we have labour shortages, and the question will be having enough people to staff these centres. So again, it's about making sure qualified staff is available. And we know that there is the struggling to find qualified staff is putting extra pressure on families as centres must cap the number of places due to staffing shortages. Now, of course, that is linked to wages and whether or not it's an attractive career pathway. Median wages for early childhood teachers are about 20% lower than those of primary school teachers. There are poorer working conditions, fewer leave days and greater workplace pressures. More than half of graduates of early childhood education degrees choose employment in primary school. So clearly we still do not have parity across these education sectors, and we are picking and choosing which ones we value. We need to do better to make sure that entire pathway is supported and equitable. The government's commitment to early childhood education is welcome, but as I say, more can be done. And so I think then it comes again to that coordination piece between states and territories and the federal level to improve recruitment and retention of early childhood educators. Removing unnecessary workforce barriers like how moving between state and territory jurisdictions, improving opportunities for career development such as early career support and mentoring programs, and of course you do get back to wage increases. So I welcome this legislation. It is an essential part of us having an equitable and society where men and women, all parents, have that opportunity to juggle the responsibility of parenting and advancing and working and making a financial contribution by being in paid employment. It is so important that early childcare be available. And ultimately, it is a key to us having a smart next generation. We know the data shows that engagement in early childcare helps development, it helps and improves learning outcomes as children go on to primary school.
I do.